Thank you very much for the introduction, and it's a great pleasure to welcome Hena Mehta, Sonal Kapoor, and Anjali Bansal to this discussion. It's my pleasure and privilege to be moderating this session today. And Anjali Bansal has been caught up in another meeting and is expected to join us very shortly. But given the relevance of the discussion and the interest of time, we would like to get started with the two panelists who have joined, Sonal Kapoor and Hena Mehta. Thanks again, both for taking time out and joining this discussion. I'll just introduce the two of you, and then we'll get going to the session. Right. Ms. Hena Mehta is the founder and CEO of Basis, first of its kind platform powering financial independence for Indian women. She has the rich cross-functional experience of financial services and technology, having worked for organizations such as Square, EasyChap, as well as Goldman Sachs. She's also an MBA grad from the Wharton School and is a founder and network leader of Lean in Bangalore chapter, which has more than 2,500 women professionals. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to the panel, Hena. Thank you for being here. And the next panelist is Ms. Sonal Kapoor. Sonal is a senior director at Flipkart. She is leading their financial services initiatives like Flipkart EMI, Flipkart BNPL, invoice discounting products, and also insurance products. Prior to joining Flipkart, Sonal headed the strategic alliances at Ola, and she also has consulting experience from Stanton Chase. Sonal is an MBA grad from the Indian School of Business. Thank you for joining us, Sonal. It's a great pleasure to have you both here.
Thank you, Sadha.
Right. So we're going to today chat on what makes women thrive at the workplaces, and more importantly, what makes them thrive if they are working in financial services, right? And this is something very close to our hearts. It's a dear cause for all of us, right? And as such, if we think about it, or if somebody hears about the topic, they may think that this is actually a done to death topic. But let us just take a moment to reflect on some of the stats, right? For the same job and the same role, women still earn 38% lower than their male counterparts, right? And women are less than 20% of workforce currently in India. I'm not specifically talking about financial services, but they're just workforce, but are 48% of the total population, right? And 20% is actually lesser than some of our lesser developed counterparts like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, right? Let's take a moment for that to sink in, right? This has been definitely exacerbated by COVID. A lot of women have chosen to stay back, have dropped out of workforce, etc. over the last couple of years. I mean, I know that, in the introduction, we heard that, COVID has actually been a boon for some women, but some of them have had to actually drop out because of the challenges of managing both, right? And we still have like only 3.5% of NSE listed companies having women as an MD and CEO, right? And this is one of the oldest stock exchanges that we have. And only less than 6% of Fortune India 500 companies has women in the executive role, any kind of executive role, right? And only 7% of the women invest on their own. I think I picked it actually from the Basis side, if I'm not mistaken, right? So these are the kind of stats. I mean, it's not to say that everything is gloomy, right? I mean, we have had a lot of improvement. Our generation has been a beneficiary of that improvement in the quality and life of women compared to what our parents had. And I'm fairly certain that given the direction at which we are going, the next generation will have it far better than us. But it is important that people like us get together and speak about this, right? Because, there are things that come out in the open when we speak. And there will also be some blind spots that people are probably not aware of. And such discussions can actually help, move things in the right direction. So from that perspective, I think what we are discussing is very close to my heart. And I have to thank you both once again for taking time out to be a part of this, right? Just to get going, right? I have not structured it as a question specific to any of the panelists. It's more like I want to keep this very open-ended discussion. I have few pointers that I have to steer this discussion, and I would like you both to give your opinion on all the questions, all the pointers that I put forth. Right. So first is, we have like conventional wisdom that tells us that, there is reduction in women as we move higher up the corporate ladder. And we have always heard that, it's because of the pressure of having to keep it all together, right? You have, your family responsibilities, you have work-related responsibilities, and, it's very difficult to keep it all together, is what we have heard conventionally. But what I do want to understand is it oversimplifying, or is it kind of, masking something else, right? What are your thoughts and what are your lived experiences more than your thoughts, right? What has been your experiences? Is this the right way to approach this problem? Is the right way to think this through? First, if Hena can take this up, and then Sonal, please.
Yeah. So
I think what you mentioned, Sudha, and the question was that oversimplifying the problem? Absolutely, right. There are so many layers that this problem really has, where we see that pipeline depleting as women, rise in the corporate ladder or figure out the, as even Sheryl Sandberg calls it, the jungle gym of your careers. We see that drop off, right? But it is layered, and it starts with I kind of look at it in three layers, right? So one is yourself, right? So women do tend to have more self-doubt, tend to have more self-criticism, lower confidence, and that starts from a young age, right? And it starts with some conditioning. So that's one barrier. That's the first barrier that we may have to overcome. The second is your immediate environment. So this is home, your support system at home, whether it's you're living with parents, or you're living independently, or then with a spouse, a partner, etc. That plays a massive role, right? And as you mentioned, COVID brought about sort of amplified some of those problems. In a way, the flexibility, work from home was great. But in another way, just all of these, immediate environment challenges can play a huge, huge part, right? And I'm happy to go into some of them. I'm a new mom. I have a 7-month-old baby. I'm running a startup. So happy to kind of dive deeper into, my experiences, managing both. And then the third thing, obviously, is the broader ecosystem, right? These are, your work colleagues, if you're an entrepreneur, the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem, the investors you're working with, the partners you're working with, the teams you're building, right? All of this sort of contribute to your experience, what battles you want to pick to fight, right? And unfortunately, it just so happens that we see that drop off. But that it's layered. It starts from self to immediate, and then finally the broader ecosystem, where each of these layers has its own set of challenges that contributes to these not so great numbers that you were talking about.
Completely, Hena. I mean, your answer was actually bang on, because we always talk about only one factor, but it's actually, multivariate. And congratulations on your baby. And it's amazing what you're doing, right? I mean, running a startup with a 7-month-old baby, I can totally kind of rocking. Congratulations. Sonal, can I hear your thoughts on, this entire problem and what is actually causing this? And
I think, first of all, congratulations, Hena. I think you just set the tone for this discussion, right, by saying you're doing what most of the people think is not doable. So thank you for that. But I think, Hena sort of pointed out at it, right? It's not a problem that essentially we can just force on one person in the ecosystem and say, hey, this is what is causing the breakage here, right? I think, most of the times when women are not able to come back to work, because maybe, they're trying to come back after a mad break, or they're actually finding it hard to manage maybe, both the personal and the professional life. I actually attribute it to the failure of the organization, right? Because, I mean, in most of the organizations, if you ever hear when they talk about their values, their culture, what they're focused on, of course, they all talk about how they're focused on inclusion, how they're focused on diversity, and of course, at a general level, making any organization an inclusive place to work, right? I think if there is any woman employee that's facing a hardship in terms of being able to manage, both the sides, it therefore is automatically the responsibility of the organization to step in and enable that, right? And there are multiple ways to do that. I mean, it's not always about making a hard choice in terms of taking a very strong role or a career growth path, and actually sort of focusing on your life and family, right? But just some changes, some support system here and there, right, can actually sort of enable women to participate much more better, and therefore not having to take a hit or make a choice between two specific parts of their lives, right? So at least that's what I think about. Similarly, while it is a responsibility of organization on one side because they have to professionally, I think, provide that ecosystem. I think same thing again from a personal life perspective, right? Having the right support system, as Hena was also calling out, right? Friends, family, partner, right? Could make a huge difference. And I think if you have the right support system, I don't think there is any way you would fail, or you would shy away from any challenge, right? So I think that's what's important for us to just everybody in the ecosystem to really raise their hands and say, we are all equally part of this. And let's take actions to support and solve it, and not sort of say she was not able to manage. It was hard. Maybe she should take a break for some time. I think those are just excuses, frankly.
Absolutely cannot agree with you more, right? I mean, actually picking up on this thread, I had the related question to this, right? I mean, most of us say that, offering greater flexibility is the way to be more inclusive, right? Is the way to bring more women into workspace. It's the way to retain them. It's bringing women is one thing, right? But it cannot be a round robin. You bring somebody who's going and you're bringing somebody in, right? You have to also retain and ensure that they are thriving. The conversation is actually about thriving, not getting people into workforce, right? So from that perspective, right, I mean, we keep hearing that, work from home has actually helped a class of women. I'm actually, a beneficiary of that when I had a baby 1 year back. I mean, I spent the first year of the baby's life at home, working from home. I never had to step into office, and that was possible only because of COVID, right? But there is a larger argument which is currently being made, and I'm hearing more and more of it now, where we are saying that work from home is not the right way, or I mean, it doesn't help organizations that are probably not very mature, right? And even from mature organizations, let's say guys, companies like JP Morgan, companies like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, in the Wall Street, were the first ones to put up their hands to say that, hey, I want a 100% return to work, right? And I don't actually want to work with people who want to work from home. I would rather kind of ask people to step out if they are not on board with working from office, etc., right? So so one hand, the earlier stage companies obviously are feeling that it's very hard to get the culture together if people are working from homes, working from 100+ home offices, right? On the other hand, in financial services especially, we always have had challenges, right? Financial services is one of the most conservative, I mean, even though we call it fintech, etc., today financial services continues to be very, very orthodox and very, very conservative from that standpoint, right? There is a code to work, and that is how the industry functions, right? So my question to you, both of you, is one, is this likely to get better if the flexibility is not asked only from only for the women in the organization, but it's the flexibility is actually offered to both men and women? Because right now, if women ask for flexibility, it is actually stigmatized, right? Then the hiring actually kind of gets misaligned, where you think that hey, if I recruit more and more women, I'm going to offer more flexibility, and probably that will get into how traditionally things are done, right? And I would rather get men to come work for me, right? So is it fair to say that when we are talking about inclusiveness, when we are talking about flexibility, we talk about it for both the genders? One, it doesn't get stigmatized for women. Second is, if this kind of flexibility is being made available to men, they will pick up, or I hope they will pick up their fair share of work at home, right? Which will actually enable, women to also focus better on what they do at work, and will help them kind of, thrive where they are, right? So just, your thoughts around this, please. Sonal, first you, and then on to Hena.
Okay, sure. I think no, you're right. So then also, I think when we all talk inclusiveness, it's gender inclusiveness, right? So it's not women versus men. It's actually across all type of peoples, all people essentially at the end of the day, right? So that's how I would like to think of it. And again, when we use the words flexibility, certain programs, right? The idea is to give you the flexibility to work and perform the way you want to perform, right? In any organization. You're absolutely right. It should not be restricted to women. I mean, I'm sure there are certain men who would want to sort of stay at home, maybe spend more time with their family. And by the way, I've experienced this in my own organization, right? Today we have like a hybrid work policy, and I know a lot of people who absolutely love it because they have this, thanks to in some form and shape, because of COVID, they were actually able to spend a lot of time with their family, and they just love the aspect of spending additional time with their kids, or playing with their kids, or taking their kids to maybe classes and schools and so on, right? So I think one, whether work from home is a success or not is not a function of gender, right? I think we all have to be very clear. It's also not a function of whether you're a new age company, or old age company, a small company, or a big company. I think there are examples everywhere. There is a huge company like Google with an experimental and an open mindset that will make work from home work. I know of for a lot of startups across the world that are also making it work beautifully, right? I think if a JP Morgan is refusing to accept that it works, then maybe there is something that they're missing into the larger picture, right? So maybe there's a need to just experiment, right? So I think that's the way to look at it. And similarly, I think it's about ensuring that all your employees are set up for success, they thrive. Maybe at times it is true that women just need to be pushed a little extra because of, unfortunately, the barriers we've had in the past. I think so. Therefore, you just have to make an extra effort. But just a slight bit of an effort, I think, can just do wonders, right? But I do wholly agree that all the policies have to be inclusive. Otherwise, we won't really be able to make that inclusive culture. I mean, that's what we're trying to derive here. So, at least that's what I think. Hena, over to you.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts, right, Sonal? I think flexibility, I mean, which human being doesn't like flexibility or the freedom to really operate in an environment you're comfortable with, in conditions you like, etc., right? And obviously this was one of the silver linings of the pandemic, that brought to light that maybe you don't have to all be physically in the same place to produce the same results, right? So I think that's definitely true. So that I think even men, it's not, I think in a lot of cases men do want to contribute more, right? It's not that the intent isn't there, but sometimes their environment, immediate ecosystem, same things, right, may prevent them from doing so. So I think flexibility is across the board, can help. Obviously, the debate of work from home versus returning to office in general, I mean, there are pros and cons, right? We are a complete remote team. I mean, we're still a relatively small team, and it's been manageable. And we did do a trial run a couple of months ago where we brought everyone back to the office, and it was great, right? Like ideas, collaboration, bonds, etc. Also because a lot of the team was hired during the pandemic. That was great. What I also loved about it was there was a clear separation, right? And when we were at work in the office, there was nothing about the home, whether or not you have children, but generally like stuff around the house, something's broken, something needs to be, like, none of that really sort of took over mind space. I think that those are some of the positives of, basically physically separating yourself from home. But then there are also other positives. And so that you mentioned you have a child. I honestly don't know how women did it, like went back to the office because I've not experienced that part of it. And I've had a baby. I was able to get back to work pretty quickly. Being an entrepreneur also didn't, and I wanted to, right? It's not that someone was, forcing me to get back to work, but all of that was possible because, I was at home. I could, manage both. So I think there's pros and cons to both. And also work from home, it depends a lot on your environment at home, right? If it's not conducive to doing productive work or getting that, that quiet time without distractions, etc., then it actually works against you. So I'm not sure which camp I'm in. I know I'm kind of doing pros and cons of each, but I don't think there's like one single answer, but absolutely agree with you in terms of flexibility can benefit everyone, really.
But, so glad to note Anjali has been able to join. I'll just introduce Anjali to the audience, and then we'll continue on the discussion, right? Anjali Bansal is the founder of Avaana Capital, investing in technology and innovation-led startups, catalyzing climate solutions and sustainability. And previously, Anjali has been the non-executive chairperson of Dena Bank, appointed by the government to steer a resolution leading to a merger with Bank of Baroda. And prior to that, Anjali was a global partner and managing director with TPG Growth Private Equity. She started her career as a strategy consultant with McKinsey & Co. in New York. And Anjali has invested, mentored various successful startups, including Delivery, Urban Company, Darwinbox, Nykaa, Lenskart, Coverstack, etc. She serves as independent director on several boards, including Tata Power, Nestle, Piramal Enterprises, etc. And she has previously chaired the India Board of Women World Banking. Anjali is also a member of Niti Aayog Evolution Review Committee. She's also a member of Advisory Council for the Open Network for Digital Commerce, right? And she has been appointed also as the president of Bombay Chamber of Commerce. So, very, very illustrious. It's a pleasure to have you amongst us, Anjali, and we're glad that you were able to join the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and delighted to be here with all of you today.
Great. So Anjali, we were, getting just initial discussions around, what is keeping women away from workforce and how they are, still underrepresented in the top positions across industries, not just necessarily in finance and so on, right? So the initial part of the discussions were revolving around providing flexibility, etc., to kind of, bring those numbers up. How do we think through? How do we, go about it, etc. Right. So So one of the points that Hena made is like it's not a very straightjacket approach to this, right. There are various factors which are involved in why there is an underrepresentation of women, starting from how girls are conditioned to think about their careers and so on, right. And one of the points she rightly made was also a problem at the top of the funnel, right. And when I was doing a little bit of research to kind of steer this discussion, there was a lot of data available on how enrollment at STEM courses look like, right? I mean, not necessarily in India, but at least in US there is a lot of data, right? And then what is the enrollment for STEM courses and how that changes when people actually pick up engineering careers, etc. Right? But I could not really find out that kind of data for financial services in India, because there is no one course that helps you get into financial services, right? You could be an engineer. I mean, many of them are engineers and are actually here, right? So I mean, but anecdotally we can definitely say that top of the funnel continues to be a problem, or does it? I mean, it's not actually a top of funnel problem. The dropouts are actually happening midway through the career, right? What are your thoughts, right, Anjali, on how do you see attracting that kind of applications from women? What would be conducive for them to do so, and how do we ensure that there is no dropout in between?
So great question. And the good news is that we are all having this discussion together today. The bad news is it is the same discussion we were having 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
So we've made progress, but not enough. But we have made progress. So to your point, Aruna, earlier in my engineering class, for example, and this was way back sort of in the late 80s, early 90s, we were 15 girls in a class of 350. So you do the math, it's less than 5%. Today, the intake for engineering colleges is somewhere between 25 to 40%, depending on the college, is female. Graduation classes from college, regular colleges, not necessarily engineering, are kind of 50-50. So then what happens? So to your point, you don't need to have any particular degree to get into finance. So since we're talking about financial services, you could be a psychology graduate, right? You could be a chartered accountant, you could be a commerce graduate, you could be a science graduate.
Right.
So what happens? So it's not as much an intake problem. There is an intake problem. The intake problem, we have made progress. Where it feels like we haven't made enough progress, despite very good intention and a lot of action that has happened in the last 20 years, is in the pipeline. So the leaky pipeline is actually a fairly well understood phenomenon. Unfortunately, we've been talking about it, like I said, for 20 years, and this is my knowledge, maybe 30. Something happens that causes women to either not get on the fast track or not stay on the fast track. And how do you get to leadership roles? You don't get to leadership roles by accident one day. It is a journey to get there. And when we talk about women in leadership positions, talk about anybody in leadership positions. I mean, I have this question of leaning in is not a women's question, actually.
Hello.
Trade-offs. I have very few. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
So I don't know many men who don't want to spend more time with their families, for example, right? But they make those trade-offs. So there is no path to success which is not paved with difficult choices. So those choices have to be made. They have to be supported. Lot of action has happened. If I were to think about the three main actors in this play, there is the individual, the society in the context of which the individual lives, and the organizations that the individual works in. And finally, there is a very large actor, which is the state. So most progressive states, including our country, we've got very good laws. There are laws that ensure parity on wage. There are laws that promote well-being in the workplace, that are very harsh around sexual harassment and so on, right? And discrimination. So the state has done its job. Most good organizations, at least the intent is there. They're putting in the right systems and policies. The hardware is getting put in place. The problem is the software. And that's the social context, the culture. Somebody mentioned the conditioning of girls as they are raised. Having a job and having a career is not optional for boys.
Absolutely.
They are conditioned. They have to grow up and work. Whereas that is an optional piece. It's a choice for women to work. What can we do as organizations, as parents, as society to make it non-optional? then we'll make progress. We will not get to equitable workplaces if we do not have equitable home places.
Absolutely.
And this notion of why is work-life balance a question for women? It's a question for everybody.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I'll
No,
pause there.
correct. Actually, you made a great point, in society's place in ensuring that this does not happen. Like you rightly point out, I think government really has done its, we have like one of the most progressive laws for women, even better than developed countries, right? And still, if you're not able to make progress, or make progress fast enough, then that is definitely boiling down to the conditioning and the society around us, right? And I had actually a, very interesting question around that. So, I mean, a lot of, at least from the kind of conversations I've been a part of, it looks like, role modeling can really help, because that is the part where society plays a role, right? In providing you the kind of role models that you can look up to, the kind of people that you can look up to and say that, hey, I want to be like that person, right? And when you see people around you, like you rightly point out, right? Men don't think that, they can either have a family or a career. They think that I have to have a family and I have to have a career, right? And those kind of, because they are always growing up, seeing men do both, right? But maybe not enough women grow seeing women around them do both, and that is probably also playing on their minds, right? So wanted to understand from you, like, what kind of role models have you been having? And I mean, like, we've had great role models in financial services in India, but particularly in banking, I don't really know the reason why. We've had Arundhati Bhattacharya, we've had Chanda Kochar, we've had Shikha Sharma, Nainalal Kidwai at one point in time. But if you think of other areas of financial services, say capital markets, say venture capital, or say trading, say investing, etc., I don't think we are at that point where you can like recall 5-10 names that you can do in banking, right? And just wanted to understand, given that we are speaking about financial services today, what kind of role models, I mean, both professionally and personally, have you had, and how has that impacted your thought process, or has it, or has it not? It's something I would want to hear from all of you.
All the names you mentioned are all dear friends of mine, right? So
Great.
one does have the advantage of having grown up professionally, surrounded by both peers. And I also had the big advantage, in fact, in the organization you start with plays a big role. So I was lucky to start my business career with McKinsey, where gender was not an issue. In New York, particularly in those days, I did financial services consulting. Most of my client teams, most of my firm teams were men, but you never felt your gender quite as much as what you delivered. So merit matters. I've had lots of role models growing up, and men and women. I also actually, and I've mentioned this in our earlier previous conversation with all of you, Sudha, is having groups like this where it's a bunch of women talking to another bunch of women is not necessarily the solution. I think if we are talking about diversity and inclusion, it should be a diverse panel.
Absolutely.
We should include the men, and men have played a big role for our generation, particularly all our champions, sponsors, mentors were largely men because there were very few women. Right. So why look only inside? You have to, obviously there are role models and friends and champions that matter, or people who give you good advice, people who are positive and say, yes, you can, versus saying, no, you can't. It starts with the family. I mentioned my firm. I was raised by a family where having a career was not optional.
Right.
And ultimately, the individual has to look within. So I talked about all the other folks. I said society, family, organization, state. The individual has to want it. Right. She has to be willing to put in what it takes and make those tough choices as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Anjali, your point is noted. Your feedback is, very correct. I mean, this panel should have had some men as well. And we will ensure that that is the case in the next edition onwards. Right. Just to go on to Sonal and Hena's point of view on the same question.
Yeah, I can go next. So absolutely agree. So I think role models play such a big role, right? You can't be what you can't see is something that's true for everyone, right? Some of the incredible women you mentioned, obviously paved the path for the next generation like us, right? If they could do it with the deeper challenges, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago when they were starting their careers, why can't we today, right? So it absolutely helps. I think beyond that, folks who've done it just right before you also make a huge difference, right? So as I was telling you, like I was thinking of starting a family while running an early stage startup, and it was super hard, right? And it's already super challenging to be running a startup. You have one baby, you want to have another one, and I think folks like and I'm actually quoting folks from the ecosystem, like Vinita Singh, who's running Sugar. She built her startup and had 2 kids. She's just a few years ahead of me in terms of experience, etc. Lizzie Chapman, and these are folks that actually reached out to when I was kind of in this mode, stressing out, etc. And they've proven that it's possible to be doing all of that. So I think just immediate role models in your peer group, maybe just a few years. They don't have to be even older than you, right? Just who've done it in your peer group make a huge difference. And obviously, women who've come before you in much harder conditions, still having, again, I know this is overdone, this phrase, but broken the glass ceiling and done what they have make a massive difference.
No, absolutely. I've actually picked up Indomitable by Arundhati Bhattacharya for my current read, hoping to learn not a few, but many things from reading that book. So very right. Right. Sonal, your views, and we move on to the next one.
No, I think both Anjali and Hena sort of captured it. Sudha, I think role model is everywhere, right? It could be in some of the people, like Hena said, who have done some great things in the past. Could be few years. In fact, a lot of times your role model tends to be people who you're closely working with, and you see them doing some great things, taking some steps that maybe you were not so comfortable. And I think that just gives you the confidence to actually try out, to break that glass ceiling, right, that Hena was talking about. So I think it's absolutely important for one to have some role models, in their journey. And also the role models continue to evolve, right, as you continue to learn more. But role models could be, any and everyone, depending on where you are in your journey, right? Your peers, your friends, your family at times, right? Like for me, my role model has been my mom, and she's not in finance, but she's been working in general management, right? And she actually started working at the age of 35 when she actually had 2 kids. So, it could be anywhere, but I think you just have to seek one. But true, it plays a very important role in life.
Good. And I mean, we've been talking about leaning in, and I think you're also running the Lean In chapter in Bangalore. I mean, there is a very strong view, that, women advocate far less for themselves than their male counterparts, right? And it is directly kind of a function of probably their own self-belief, right? I mean, am I deserving this? Am I good at this, right? Most women, as per some survey results, always attribute their success to probably having a very supportive family, or probably, to being at the right place at the right time, or to plain old luck, right? But very, very few actually say that I got this because I am good, right? Because I'm good at what I do, right? I mean, that is probably not what is coming across, from the results that I've seen, right? So is this actually the case, or with the discourse changing all around us, do you actually think that that is no more a problem? And many women in your workplaces, are they walking in and saying, "Hey, I deserve a raise, I deserve a promotion, I've done a good job," putting up their hand to say that, "Hey, I want to do this, right? Why can't I be the one to do this," right? So, I mean, what's the experience that you have all had in wherever you are working, and your thoughts and views on it?
I can take this first, and then would love to hear Anjali and Sonal's thoughts as well. This is changing, right? So that younger women coming into the workforce are negotiating hard, right? They're demanding titles, they're demanding roles, and as someone on the other side, so now as hiring for my team, I love seeing it. Obviously, it puts me as the person employing them in a harder position, because I now have to, agree to higher salaries because of obviously the incredible capabilities, etc. these women bring. But it's changing. I'm loving the confidence. I don't know if it's a Gen Z thing or younger millennials or whatever it is, right? And that's continuing. I think personally, for me, I do struggle with it, right? And imposter syndrome is real, right? How do I get here? Do I deserve to be here? I'm not performing well enough. Things like that, which I think everyone goes through. Again, it's not only a woman-specific problem, but everyone goes through in some flavor or the other, and that's something we have to overcome. But yeah, I think it's changing, and I'm loving seeing that people are advocating for themselves, standing up for what they believe in, and not just, agreeing to things that they may not be happy for, right? I'm constantly, we're all told, right? If you don't ask, you don't get. I struggled with that personally, first few years of my career, still learning as I go along, but I'm loving to see that the 20-something-year-olds coming into the workforce now, it's just a very, very, very different approach, and that's super promising.
Great to hear that from you, Hena. Sonal, what do you see and what do you think?
I actually see a mixed bag. To be fair, I completely agree with Hena. Most of the team that I've hired new, I actually do not see a difference in the way, women ask for what's rightfully there versus men, right? It's pretty much about the job, the responsibilities, the salary. It's exactly the same attitude. I think there is also this part of the population, women population in specific. I think, maybe in a lot of open organizations where I still don't think they actually feel this as a challenge, right? I personally have never felt it. I've been vocal that I deserve what I deserve. And in case I don't deserve it, it's got to be because I'm not doing a good job, but not because of anything else. And I've, again, usually not seen that concern. However, what I've seen is that in certain pockets of the organization, in certain pockets of the role that are maybe not so, that's maybe a lot of more back-end work, I still see, sort of correlating to the point that you're making, maybe women not being, not maybe choosing to actually play a confrontational role, right? Which means actually sort of asking for what's rightfully there. So you're right, there is maybe some pocket that still needs to sort of understand that. I wouldn't say understand, I think they already know that. It's just sort of making that call. The day they decide to, I think they'll be excellent. But I think it's sort of a mixed bag, but it's definitely changing, at least in the new genre that's coming up for employees. There's absolutely no difference between women and men. At least that's not what I see.
And Anjali, you had held, very, very senior positions across organizations, across, government bodies, right? How do you see that? What's your view on this?
I agree with Hena and Sonal. It is changing, and it's a very positive trend where the younger women, and now increasingly slightly older women also, they are asking for what is rightfully theirs. The squeaky wheel does get greased. Yeah. At the same time, good organizations don't necessarily squeak only greasy wheels, right? They kind of have a structured process. One of the things that is not changing fast enough, so that's along the glass half full. By the way, the glass is always full. Some of it is water, some of it is air. So we are talking about displacing the air with water here. It's always full. There's something going on. Large organizations, you still find very small pockets, admittedly now, very small pockets of this sense of, and this is when they're dividing, if you will, the bonus pie or the financial pie, that her salary is the second one. It is
Anjali? Okay, I think we're not able to.
It is linked to something other than performance. I think that piece has to get sorted out and solved. I would love to see more and more young women or older women coming in and saying, this is my job, this is what XYZ gets paid, I've done the benchmarking, this is what I deserve. Keep me if you can afford me, right? And it's tough for us as on the other side. All of us, I have in all my portfolio, we are very, very strong advocates. So 40% of our portfolio is actually female founders. And we are extremely strong advocates of creating diverse leadership teams in all our companies. And we don't see enough women, unfortunately. We'd love to see more women.
Got it. I can speak on these with you three all day, but just in the interest of time, I want to go to that question, which I think most of the audience wants to take your views on them. What are the learnings, right, for somebody to grow quickly in this kind of an environment, fintech environment? What are probably the top 2 or 3 things that you will, say are important, right? Starting from Anjali, Hena, and then Sonal.
Nothing particularly different about fintech, and there is, by the way, no quick growth. You can learn quickly. Yeah. Your growth happens over a period of time. So keep your learning muscle very strong and agile. Fintech particularly is a fast moving space between the technology that is fast moving and everything, something new every day in regulations on the regulatory front. Right, yeah. So the regulatory front, absolutely. So keep your learning muscle very agile. Take risk. Raise your hand for things you haven't done before. And so I'll give it a shot. There is another piece of research which actually says that men will raise their hand even if they're 80% ready, and women will wait till they're 100% ready, or they feel they're 100% ready to raise their hand. Take some risk. Take some professional risk. Take some personal risk. Move to a new place. Take a new responsibility, something you haven't done before. All of that, get out of your comfort zone. I think all of that helps. Yeah, and just sort of go for it. And like I said, leaning in is not only for women, it's for everybody. So yes, lean in. That's how you grow. And very importantly for women, surround yourself with your coalition of yes sayers.
Yes.
It could be your peers, could be your managers, could be outside sponsors and mentors, could be your family, and people who say yes, you can. And edit out people who say no, you cannot.
No, very actionable, right, Anjali? I mean, at least the last part is very, very actionable. So thank you for that. Hena, what would you say?
Very, very similar to what Anjali said, right? I think we talked about advocating yourself, right? Don't shy away from what we may think is boasting and isn't modest or humble or whatever we've taught to be as girls, right? Try to break out of that mold. In fact, practice just speaking about your accomplishments, get a friend over coffee, talk about it. It may seem a little uncomfortable at first, but just get used to, right? Flex that muscle of, showcasing and talking about your accomplishments. And yes, don't attribute it to luck or God or whatever, right? That we tend to attribute our successes to. Second, I would say it takes a village. Right? It takes a village both at home, it takes a village at work. So build your tribe, find that village. Don't be afraid of, asking for help. Right. So those, I guess those are not my three, but my two things. Advocate yourself and build your village at home and at work.
Thanks. Thank you, Hena. That's very, very useful. And Sonal?
I think I'll just say one because Anjali said three, Hena said two, so I'll go with one, which is just be who you are, right? I think we're done with all the conditioning, everything that was taught. Just be who you are, do what you want to do, believe in yourself, and I think you will find the way to growth and prosperity that you're looking for. Just ask for what you want. That's it, and hopefully things will fall your way for sure with some hard work and determination.
No, absolutely. I mean, all points have been great points here, right? And I hope whoever is listening and hoping for some key takeaways. I'm sure we got there last, right? And I would like to thank you very, very much for taking part in this discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, right? And like I said, I can go on for another hour on this, but we are nearing the scheduled time for this discussion. So would like to thank Anjali, Sonal and Hena for taking the time out. It's a pleasure to have you with us at Red Avenue. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just also wanted to apologize for joining late, but we were in a great ONDC session kickoff where we are launching a big hackathon with NABARD to actually include a lot of FPOs and hopefully women producer organizations also onto the e-commerce rails, which I think is very relevant for Red Avenue and Yubi.
Absolutely. That's role modeling for the people that are listening in. Thank you for that update, Anjali. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.